Octavius, by Marcus Minucius Felix. When I consider and mentally review my remembrance of Octavius, my excellent and most faithful companion, the sweetness and charm of the man so clings to me, that I appear to myself in some sort as if I were returning to past times, and not merely recalling in my recollection things which have long since happened and gone by. Thus, in the degree in which the actual contemplation of him is withdrawn from my eyes, it is bound up in my heart and in my most intimate feelings. And it was not without reason that remarkable and holy man, when he departed this life, left to me an unbounded regret for him, especially since he himself also glowed with such a love for me at all times, that whether in matters of amusement or of business, he agreed with me in similarity of will, in either liking or disliking the same things. You would think that one mind had been shared between us two. Thus he alone was my confidant in my loves, my companion in my mistakes, and when, after the gloom had been dispersed, I emerged from the abyss of darkness into the light of wisdom and truth, he did not cast off his associate, but, what is more glorious still, he outstripped him. And thus, when my thoughts were traversing the entire period of our intimacy and friendship, the direction of my mind fixed itself chiefly on that discourse of his, wherein by very weighty arguments he converted Caecilius, who was still cleaving to superstitious vanities, to the true religion. For the sake of business and of visiting me, Octavius had hastened to Rome, having left his home, his wife, his children, and that which is most attractive in children, while yet their innocent years are attempting only half-uttered words, a language all the sweeter for the very imperfection of the faltering tongue. And at this, his arrival, I cannot express in words with how great and with how impatient a joy I exulted, since the unexpected presence of a man so very dear to me greatly enhanced my gladness. Therefore, after 1 or 2 days, when the frequent enjoyment of our continual association had satisfied the craving of affection, and when we had ascertained by mutual narrative all that we were ignorant of about one another by reason of our separation, we agreed to go to that very pleasant city, Ostia, that my body might have a soothing and appropriate remedy for drying its humours from the marine bathing, especially as the holidays of the courts at the vintage time had released me from my cares. For at that time, after the summer days, the autumn season was tending to a milder temperature, and thus, when in the early morning we were going towards the sea along the shore of the Tiber, that both the breathing air might gently refresh our limbs, and that the yielding sand might sink down under our easy footsteps with excessive pleasure, Caecilius, observing an image of Serapis, raised his hand to his mouth, as is the custom of the superstitious common people, and pressed a kiss on it with his lips. Then Octavius said, "It is not the part of a good man, my brother Marcus, so to desert a man who abides by your side at home and abroad, in this blindness of vulgar ignorance, as that you should allow him in such broad daylight as this to give himself up to stones, however they may be carved into images, anointed and crowned, since you know that the disgrace of this, his error, redounds in no less degree to your discredit than to his own." With this discourse of his, we passed over the distance between the city and the sea, and we were now walking on the broad and open shore. There the gently rippling wave was smoothing the outside sands as if it would level them for a promenade, and as the sea is always restless even when the winds are lulled, it came up on the shore, although not with waves crested and foaming, yet with waves crisped and curling. Just then we were excessively delighted at its vagaries, as on the very threshold of the water we were wetting the soles of our feet, and it now by turns approaching broke upon our feet, and now the wave retiring and retracing its course sucked itself back into itself, and thus, slowly and quietly going along, we tracked the coast of the gently bending shore, beguiling the way with stories. These stories were related by Octavius, who was discoursing on navigation, But when we had occupied a sufficiently reasonable time of our walk with discourse, retracing the same way again, we trod the path with reverted footsteps. And when we came to that place where the little ships, drawn up on an oaken framework, were lying at rest supported above the risk of ground rot, we saw some boys eagerly gesticulating as they played at throwing shells into the sea. This play is to choose a shell from the shore, rubbed and made smooth by the tossing of the waves, to take hold of the shell in a horizontal position with the fingers, to whirl it along sloping and as low down as possible upon the waves, that when thrown it may either skim the back of the wave, or may swim as it glides along with a smooth impulse, or may spring up as it cleaves the top of the waves, and rise as if lifted up with repeated springs. That boy claimed to be conqueror whose shell both went out furthest and leaped up most frequently. And thus, while we were all engaged in the enjoyment of this spectacle, Caecilius was paying no attention nor laughing at the contest, but silent, uneasy, standing apart, confessed by his countenance that he was grieving for I knew not what. To whom I said, "What is the matter? Wherefore do I not recognize, Caecilius, your usual liveliness? And why do I seek vainly for that joyousness which is characteristic of your glances even in serious matters?" Then said he, "For some time our friend Octavius's speech has bitterly vexed and worried me, in which he, attacking you, reproached you with negligence, that he might under cover of that charge more seriously condemn me for ignorance. Therefore I shall proceed further. The matter is now wholly and entirely between me and Octavius. If he is willing that I, a man of that form of opinion, should argue with him, he will now at once perceive that it is easier to hold an argument among his comrades than to engage in close conflict after the manner of the philosophers. Let us be seated on those rocky barriers that are cast there for the protection of the baths, and that run far out into the deep, that we may be able both to rest after our journey and to argue with more attention." And at his word we sat down, so that by covering me on either side, they sheltered me in the midst of the three. Nor was this a matter of observance, or of rank, or of honor, because friendship always either receives or makes equals, but that, as an arbitrator, and being near to both I might give my attention, and being in the middle I might separate the two. Then Caecilius began thus: "Although to you, Marcus, my brother, the subject on which especially we are inquiring is not in doubt, inasmuch as, being carefully informed in both kinds of life, you have rejected the one and assented to the other, yet in the present case your mind must be so fashioned that you may hold the balance of a most just judge, nor lean with a disposition to one side more than another, lest your decision may seem not to arise so much from our arguments as to be originated from your own perceptions. Accordingly, if you sit in judgment on me as a person who is new and as one ignorant of either side, there is no difficulty in making plain that all things in human affairs are doubtful, uncertain, and unsettled, and that all things are rather probable than true. Wherefore it is the less wonderful that some, from the weariness of thoroughly investigating truth, should rashly succumb to any sort of opinion rather than persevere in exploring it with persistent diligence. And thus all men must be indignant, all men must feel pain, that certain persons, and these unskilled in learning, strangers to literature, without knowledge even of sordid arts, should dare to determine on any certainty concerning the nature at large and the divine majesty, of which so many of the multitude of sects in all ages still doubt, and philosophy itself deliberates still. Nor without reason, since the mediocrity of human intelligence is so far from the capacity of divine investigation, that neither is it given us to know, nor is it permitted to search, nor is it religious to ravish the things that are supported in suspense in the heaven above us, nor the things which are deeply submerged below the earth, and we may rightly seem sufficiently happy and sufficiently prudent if, according to that ancient oracle of the sage, we should know ourselves intimately, But even if we indulge in a senseless and useless labor and wander away beyond the limits proper to our humility, and though inclined towards the earth, we transcend with daring ambition heaven itself and the very stars, let us at least not entangle this error with vain and fearful opinions. Let the seeds of all things have been in the beginning condensed by a nature combining them in itself. What God is the author here? Let the members of the whole world be by fortuitous concurrences united, digested, fashioned. What God is the contriver? Although fire may have lit up the stars, although the lightness of its own material may have suspended the heaven, although its own material may have established the earth by its weight, and although the sea may have flowed in from moisture, whence is this religion? Whence this fear? What is this superstition? Man and every animal which is born, inspired with life and nourished, is as a voluntary concretion of the elements, into which again man and every animal is divided, resolved, and dissipated. So all things flow back again into their source and are turned again into themselves, without any artificer or judge or creator. Thus, the seeds of fires, being gathered together, cause other suns, and again others, always to shine forth. Thus the vapors of the earth being exhaled cause the mists always to grow, which being condensed and collected cause the clouds to rise higher, and when they fall cause the rains to flow, the winds to blow, the hail to rattle down. Or when the clouds clash together, they cause the thunder to bellow, the lightnings to grow red, the thunderbolts to gleam forth. Therefore they fall everywhere. They rush on the mountains, they strike the trees. Without any choice, they blast places sacred and profane. They smite mischievous men, and often too religious men. Why should I speak of tempests, various and uncertain, wherein the attack upon all things is tossed about without any order or discrimination, in shipwrecks, that the fates of good and bad men are jumbled together, their deserts confounded, in conflagrations, that the destruction of innocent and guilty is united, and when with the plague taint of the sky a region is stained, that all perish without distinction, and when the heat of war is raging, that it is the better men who generally fall. In peace also, not only is wickedness put on the same level with the lot of those who are better, but it is also regarded in such esteem that in the case of many people you know not whether their depravity is most to be detested or their felicity to be desired. But if the world were governed by divine providence and by the authority of any deity, Phalaris and Dionysius would never have deserved to reign, Rutilius and Camillus would never have merited banishment, Socrates would never have merited the poison. Behold the fruit-bearing trees, behold the harvest already white, the vintage already dropping, is destroyed by the rain, is beaten down by the hail. Thus either an uncertain truth is hidden from us and kept back, or, which is rather to be believed, in these various and wayward chances, fortune, unrestrained by laws, is ruling over us. Since then either fortune is certain or nature is uncertain, how much more reverential and better it is, as the high priests of truth, to receive the teaching of your ancestors, to cultivate the religions handed down to you, to adore the gods whom you were first trained by your parents to fear, rather than to know with familiarity. Not to assert an opinion concerning the deities, but to believe your forefathers, who, while the age was still untrained in the birth times of the world itself, deserved to have gods either propitious to them or as their kings. Thence, therefore, we see through all empires and provinces and cities that each people has its national rites of worship and adores its local gods, as the Eleusinians worship Ceres, the Phrygians, Mater, the Epidaurians, Aesculapius, the Chaldeans, Belus, the Syrians, Astarte, the Taurians, Diana, the Gauls, Mercurius, the Romans, all divinities. Thus, their power and authority has occupied the circuit of the whole world. Thus, it has propagated its empire beyond the paths of the sun and the bounds of the ocean itself, in that in their arms they practice a religious valor. in that they fortify their city with the religions of sacred rites, with chaste virgins, with many honors, and the names of priests. In that, when besieged and taken all but the capital alone, they worship the gods, which when angry any other people would have despised. And through the lines of the Gauls, marveling at the audacity of their superstition, they move unarmed with weapons, but armed with the worship of their religion. While in the city of an enemy, when taken while still in the fury of victory, they venerate the conquered deities. While in all directions they seek for the gods of the strangers and make them their own, while they build altars even to unknown divinities and to the manes. Thus, in that they acknowledge the sacred institutions of all nations, they have also deserved their dominion. Hence, the perpetual course of their veneration has continued, which is not weakened by the long lapse of time, but increased, because antiquity has been accustomed to attribute to ceremonies and temples so much of sanctity as it has ascribed of age. Nor yet by chance, for I would venture in the meantime even to take for granted the point in debate, and so to err on the safe side. Have our ancestors succeeded in their undertakings either by the observance of auguries, or by consulting the entrails, or by the institution of sacred rites, or by the dedication of temples? Consider what is the record of books. You will at once discover that they have inaugurated the rites of all kinds of religions, either that the divine indulgence might be rewarded, or that the threatening anger might be averted, or that the wrath already swelling and raging might be appeased. Witness the Idaean mother, who at her arrival both approved the chastity of the matron and delivered the city from the fear of the enemy. Witness the statues of the equestrian brothers, consecrated even as they had showed themselves on the lake, who, with horses breathless, foaming and smoking, announced the victory over the Persian on the same day on which they had gained it. Witness the renewal of the games of the offended Jupiter on account of the dream of a man of the people. And an acknowledged witness is the devotion of the Decii. Witness also Curtius, who filled up the opening of the profound chasm either with the mass or with the glory of his knighthood. Moreover, more frequently than we wished have the auguries, when despised, borne witness to the presence of the gods. Thus Alia is an unlucky name. Thus the battle of Claudius and Junius is not a battle against the Carthaginians, but a fatal shipwreck. Thus, that Thrasymene might be both swollen and discolored with the blood of the Romans. Flaminius despised the auguries, and that we might again demand our standards from the Parthians, Crassus both deserved and scoffed at the imprecations of the terrible sisters. I omit the old stories, which are many, and I pass by the songs of the poets about the births and the gifts and the rewards of the gods. Moreover, I hasten over the fates predicted by the oracles, lest antiquity should appear to you excessively fabulous. Look at the temples and lanes of the gods, by which the Roman city is both protected and armed. They are more august by the deities which are their inhabitants, who are present and constantly dwelling in them, than opulent by the ensigns and gifts of worship. Thence therefore the prophets, filled with the god and mingled with him, collect futurity beforehand, give caution for dangers, medicine for diseases, hope for the afflicted, help to the wretched, solace to calamities, alleviation to labors. Even in our repose we see, we hear, we acknowledge the gods, whom in the daytime we impiously deny, refuse, and abjure. Therefore, since the consent of all nations concerning the existence of the immortal gods remains established, although their nature or their origin remains uncertain, I suffer nobody swelling with such boldness, and with I know not what irreligious wisdom, who would strive to undermine or weaken this religion, so ancient, so useful, so wholesome, even although he may be Theodorus of Cyrene, or one who is before him, Diagoras the Melian, to whom antiquity applied the surname of atheist, both of whom, by asseverating that there were no gods, took away all the fear by which humanity is ruled, and all veneration absolutely. Yet never will they prevail in this discipline of impiety under the name and authority of their pretended philosophy. When the men of Athens both expelled Protagoras of Abdera and in public assembly burnt his writings because he disputed deliberately rather than profanely concerning the divinity, why is it not a thing to be lamented that men, for you will bear with my making use pretty freely of the force of the plea that I have undertaken, that men, I say, of a reprobate, unlawful and desperate faction should rage against the gods, who, having gathered together from the lowest dregs the more unskilled, and women, credulous and by the facility of their sex yielding, establish a herd of a profane conspiracy, which is leagued together by nightly meetings and solemn fasts and inhuman meats, not by any sacred rite, but by that which requires expiation, a people skulking and shunning the light, silent in public, but garrulous in corners. They despise the temples as dead houses, they reject the gods, they laugh at sacred things, wretched they pity, if they are allowed, the priests. Half naked themselves, they despise honors and purple robes. O wondrous folly and incredible audacity! They despise present torments, although they fear those which are uncertain and future. And while they fear to die after death, they do not fear to die for the present. So does a deceitful hope soothe their fear with the solace of a revival. And now, as wickeder things advance more fruitfully and abandoned manners creep on day by day, those abominable shrines of an impious assembly are maturing themselves throughout the whole world. Assuredly, this confederacy ought to be rooted out and execrated. They know one another by secret marks and insignia, and they love one another almost before they know one another. Everywhere also there is mingled among them a certain religion of lust, and they call one another promiscuously brothers and sisters, that even a not unusual debauchery may by the intervention of that sacred name become incestuous. It is thus that their vain and senseless superstition glories in crimes. Nor, concerning these things, would intelligent report speak of things so great and various, and requiring to be prefaced by an apology, unless truth were at the bottom of it. I hear that they adore the head of an ass, that basest of creatures consecrated by, I know not what silly persuasion, a worthy and appropriate religion for such manners. Some say that they worship the virilia of their pontiff and priest, and adore the nature, as it were, of their common parent. I know not whether these things are false. Certainly suspicion is applicable to secret and nocturnal rites. And he who explains their ceremonies by reference to a man punished by extreme suffering for his wickedness, and to the deadly wood of the cross, appropriates fitting altars for reprobate and wicked men, that they may worship what they deserve. Now the story about the initiation of young novices is as much to be detested as it is well known. An infant covered over with meal, that it may deceive the unwary, is placed before him who is to be stained with their rites. This infant is slain by the young pupil, who has been urged on as if to harmless blows on the surface of the meal, with dark and secret wounds. Thirstily, O horror, they lick up its blood, eagerly they divide its limbs. By this victim they are pledged together. With this consciousness of wickedness they are covenanted to mutual silence. Such sacred rites as these are more foul than any sacrileges. And of their banqueting it is well known all men speak of it everywhere. Even the speech of our Curtensian testifies to it. On a solemn day they assemble at the feast with all their children, sisters, mothers, people of every sex and of every age. There, after much feasting, when the fellowship has grown warm and the fervor of incestuous lust has grown hot with drunkenness, a dog that has been tied to the chandelier is provoked by throwing a small piece of offal beyond the length of a line by which he is bound, to rush and spring. And thus, the conscious light being overturned and extinguished in the shameless darkness, the connections of abominable lust involve them in the uncertainty of fate. Although not all, in fact, yet in consciousness all are alike incestuous, since by the desire of all of them, everything is sought for, which can happen in the act of each individual. I purposely pass over many things, for those that I have mentioned are already too many, and that all these, or the greater part of them, are true, the obscurity of their vile religion declares. For why do they endeavor with such pains to conceal and to cloak whatever they worship, since honorable things always rejoice in publicity, while crimes are kept secret? Why have they no altars, no temples, no acknowledged images? Why do they never speak openly, never congregate freely, unless for the reason that what they adore and conceal is either worthy of punishment or something to be ashamed of? Moreover, whence or who is he, or where is the one God, solitary, desolate, whom no free people, no kingdoms, and not even Roman superstition have known? The lonely and miserable nationality of the Jews worshipped one God and one peculiar to itself, but they worshipped him openly, with temples, with altars, with victims, and with ceremonies, and he has so little force or power that he is enslaved, with his own special nation, to the Roman deities. But the Christians, moreover, what wonders, what monstrosities do they feign, that he who is their God, whom they can neither show nor behold, inquires diligently into the character of all, the acts of all, and in fine, into their words and secret thoughts, that he runs about everywhere and is everywhere present. They make him out to be troublesome, restless, even shamelessly inquisitive, since he is present at everything that is done, wanders in and out in all places, although, being occupied with the whole, he cannot give attention to particulars, nor can he be sufficient for the whole while he is busied with particulars. What? Because they threaten conflagration to the whole world and to the universe itself with all its stars, are they meditating its destruction, as if either the eternal order constituted by the divine laws of nature would be disturbed, or the league of all the elements would be broken up, and the heavenly structure dissolved, and that fabric in which it is contained and bound together would be overthrown. And not content with this wild opinion, they add to it and associate with it old women's fables. They say that they will rise again after death, and ashes and dust, and with I know not what confidence they believe by turns in one another's lies. You would think that they had already lived again. It is a double evil and a twofold madness to denounce destruction to the heaven and the stars, which we leave just as we find them, and to promise eternity to ourselves who are dead and extinct, who, as we are born, so also perish. It is for this cause, doubtless also, that they execrate our funeral piles and condemn our burials by fire, as if every body, even although it be withdrawn from the flames, were not nevertheless resolved into the earth by lapse of years and ages, and as if it mattered not whether wild beasts tore the body to pieces, or seas consumed it, or the ground covered it, or the flames carried it away. Since for the carcasses every mode of sepulture is a penalty if they feel it. If they feel it not, in the very quickness of their destruction there is relief. Deceived by this error, they promise to themselves as being good, a blessed and perpetual life after their death, to others as being unrighteous, eternal punishment. Many things occur to me to say in addition, if the limits of my discourse did not hasten me. I have already shown, and take no more pains to prove, that they themselves are unrighteous. Although, even if I should allow them to be righteous, yet your agreement also concurs with the opinions of many, that guilt and innocence are attributed by fate. For whatever we do, as some ascribe it to fate, so you refer it to God. Thus, it is according to your sect to believe that men will, not of their own accord, but as elected to will. Therefore you feign an iniquitous judge, who punishes in men, not their will, but their destiny. Yet I should be glad to be informed whether or no you rise again with bodies, and if so, with what bodies, whether with the same or with renewed bodies, without a body? Then, as far as I know, there will neither be mind, nor soul, nor life. With the same body? But this has already been previously destroyed. With another body? Then it is a new man who is born, not the former one restored. And yet so long a time has passed away, innumerable ages have flowed by, and what single individual has returned from the dead, either by the fate of Protesilaus, with permission to sojourn even for a few hours, or that we might believe it for an example? All such figments of an unhealthy belief and vain sources of comfort, with which deceiving poets have trifled in the sweetness of their verse, have been disgracefully remolded by you, believing undoubtingly on your God. Neither do you at least take experience from things present, how the fruitless expectations of vain promise deceive you. Consider, wretched creatures, from your lot, while you are yet living, what is threatening you after death. Behold, a portion of you, and as you declare, the larger and better portion, are in want, are cold, are laboring in hard work and hunger, and God suffers it. He feigns. He either is not willing or not able to assist his people, and thus he is either weak or inequitable. You, who dreams over a posthumous immortality, when you are shaken by danger, when you are consumed with fever, when you are torn with pain, do you not then feel your real condition? Do you not then acknowledge your frailty? Poor wretch, are you unwillingly convinced of your infirmity and will not confess it? But I omit matters that are common to all alike. Lo, for you there are threats, punishments, tortures, and crosses, and that no longer as objects of adoration, but as tortures to be undergone. Fires also, which you both predict and fear. Where is that God who is able to help you when you come to life again, since he cannot help you while you are in this life? Do not the Romans, without any help from your God, govern, reign, have the enjoyment of the whole world, and have dominion over you? But you in the meantime, in suspense and anxiety, are abstaining from respectable enjoyments. You do not visit exhibitions, you have no concern in public displays, you reject the public banquets and abhor the sacred contests, the meats previously tasted by, and the drinks made a libation of upon, the altars. Thus you stand in dread of the gods whom you deny. You do not wreath your heads with flowers, you do not grace your bodies with odors, you reserve ointments for funeral rites, you even refuse garlands to your sepulchres, pallid, trembling beings, worthy of the pity even of our gods. Thus wretched as you are, you neither rise again, nor do you live in the meanwhile. Therefore, if you have any wisdom or modesty, cease from prying into the regions of the sky and the destinies and secrets of the world. It is sufficient to look before your feet, especially for untaught, uncultivated, boorish, rustic people. They who have no capacity for understanding civil matters are much more denied the ability to discuss divine. However, if you have a desire to philosophize, let any one of you who is sufficiently great imitate, if he can, Socrates, the Prince of Wisdom. The answer of that man, whenever he was asked about celestial matters, is well known. What is above us is nothing to us. Well, therefore, did he deserve from the oracle the testimony of singular wisdom, which oracle he himself had a presentiment of, that he had been preferred to all men for the reason, not that he had discovered all things, but because he had learned that he knew nothing, and thus the confession of ignorance is the height of wisdom. From this source flowed the safe doubting of Arcesilas, and long after of Carneades, and of very many of the academics, in questions of the highest moment, in which species of philosophy the unlearned can do much with caution, and the learned can do gloriously. What? Is not the hesitation of Simonides the lyric poet to be admired and followed by all? Which Simonides, when he was asked by Hero the tyrant what and what like he thought the gods to be, asked first of all for a day to deliberate, then postponed his reply for 2 days, and then, when pressed, he added only another, and finally, when the tyrant inquired into the causes of such a long delay, he replied that, the longer his research continued, the obscurer the truth became to him. In my opinion also, things which are uncertain ought to be left as they are, nor, while so many and so great men are deliberating, should we rashly and boldly give an opinion in another direction, lest either a childish superstition should be introduced, or all religion should be overthrown. Thus far Caecilius, and smiling cheerfully, for the vehemence of his prolonged discourse had relaxed the ardor of his indignation, he added, "And what does Octavius venture to reply to this, a man of the race of Plautus, who, while he was chief among the millers, was still the lowest of philosophers?" "Restrain," said I, "your self-approval against him, for it is not worthy of you to exult at the harmony of your discourse before the subject shall have been more fully argued on both sides, especially since your reasoning is striving after truth, not praise. And in however great a degree your discourse has delighted me by its subtle variety, yet I am very deeply moved, not concerning the present discussion, but concerning the entire kind of disputation, that for the most part the condition of truth should be changed according to the powers of discussion, and even the faculty of perspicuous eloquence. This is very well known to occur by reason of the facility of the hearers, who, being distracted by the allurement of words from attention to things, assent without distinction to everything that is said, and do not separate falsehood from truth, unaware that even in that which is incredible there is often truth, and in verisimilitude falsehood. Therefore, the oftener they believe bold assertions, the more frequently they are convinced by those who are more clever, and thus are continually deceived by their temerity. They transfer the blame of the judge to the complaint of uncertainty, so that, everything being condemned, they would rather that all things should be left in suspense than that they should decide about matters of doubt. Therefore we must take care that we do not in such sort suffer from the hatred at once of all discourses, even as very many of the more simple kind are led to execration and hatred of men in general. For those who are carelessly credulous are deceived by those whom they thought worthy, and by a kindred error, they begin to suspect everyone as wicked and dread even those whom they might have regarded as excellent. Now therefore we are anxious, because in everything there may be argument on both sides, and on the one hand the truth is for the most part obscure, and on the other side there is a marvelous subtlety, which sometimes by its abundance of words imitates the confidence of acknowledged proof, as carefully as possible to weigh each particular, that we may, while ready to applaud acuteness, yet elect, approve, and adopt those things which are right. "You are withdrawing," says Caecilius, "from the office of a religious judge, for it is very unfair for you to weaken the force of my pleading by the interpolation of a very important argument, since Octavius has before him each thing that I have said, sound and unimpaired, if he can refute it." "What you are reproving," said I, "unless I am mistaken, I have brought forward for the common advantage, so that by a scrupulous examination we might weigh our decision, not by the pompous style of the eloquence, but by the solid character of the matter itself. Nor must our attention, as you complain, be any longer called away, but with absolute silence let us listen to the reply of our friend Januarius, who is now beckoning to us." And thus Octavius began, "I will indeed speak as I shall be able to the best of my powers, and you must endeavor with me to dilute the very offensive strain of recriminations in the river of veracious words. Nor will I disguise in the outset that the opinion of my friend Natalis has swayed to and fro in such an erratic, vague, and slippery manner that we are compelled to doubt whether your information was confused, or whether it wavered backwards and forwards by mere mistake. For he varied at one time from believing the gods, at another time to being in a state of hesitation on the subject, so that the direct purpose of my reply was established with the greater uncertainty by reason of the uncertainty of his proposition. But in my friend Natalis I will not allow, I do not believe in any chicanery. Far from his simplicity is crafty trickery. What then? As he who knows not the right way, when as it happens one road is separated into many because he knows not the way, remains in anxiety, and dares neither make choice of particular roads, nor try them all. So, if a man has no steadfast judgment of truth, even as his unbelieving suspicion is scattered, so his doubting opinion is unsettled. It is therefore no wonder if Caecilius in the same way is cast about by the tide and tossed here and there among things contrary and repugnant to one another. But that this may no longer be the case, I will convict and refute all that has been said, however diverse, confirming and approving the truth alone. And for the future he must neither doubt nor waver. And since my brother broke out in such expressions as these, that he was grieved, that he was vexed, that he was indignant, that he regretted that illiterate, poor, unskilled people should dispute about heavenly things, let him know that all men are begotten alike, with a capacity and ability of reasoning and feeling, without preference of age, sex, or dignity. Nor do they obtain wisdom by fortune, but have it implanted by nature. Moreover, the very philosophers themselves, or any others who have gone forth unto celebrity as discoverers of arts, before they attained an illustrious name by their mental skill, were esteemed plebeian, untaught, half-naked. Thus it is that rich men, attached to their means, have been accustomed to gaze more upon their gold than upon heaven, while our sort of people, though poor, have both discovered wisdom and have delivered their teaching to others. Whence it appears that intelligence is not given to wealth, nor is gotten by study, but is begotten with the very formation of the mind. Therefore it is nothing to be angry or to be grieved about, though anyone should inquire, should think, should utter his thoughts about divine things, since what is wanted is not the authority of the arguer, but the truth of the argument itself. And even the more unskilled the discourse, the more evident the reasoning, since it is not colored by the pomp of eloquence and grace, but as it is sustained by the rule of right. Neither do I refuse to admit what Caecilius earnestly endeavored to maintain among the chief matters, that man ought to know himself, and to look around and see what he is, whence he is, why he is, whether collected together from the elements, or harmoniously formed of atoms, or rather made, formed, and animated by God. And it is this very thing which we cannot seek out and investigate without inquiry into the universe, since things are so coherent, so linked and associated together, that unless you diligently examine into the nature of divinity, you must be ignorant of that of humanity. Nor can you well perform your social duty unless you know that community of the world which is common to all, especially since in this respect we differ from the wild beasts, that while they are prone and tending to the earth, and are born to look upon nothing but their food, we, whose countenance is erect, whose look is turned towards heaven, as is our converse and reason, whereby we recognize, feel, and imitate God, have neither right nor reason to be ignorant of the celestial glory which forms itself into our eyes and senses.